It's still unmuted.
Okay, would you, it's unmuted?
Yes.
Oh my.
Oh, no.
Past 6 o'clock. Are you ready to go?
Ready as I'm gonna be.
Hmm?
We're ready as we're gonna be.
Okay. So let's get this meeting started. Community Review Board for January 12th, 2023. We'll make a roll call. Board Member Littleton, please raise your hand if you can hear me and everything's good.
I'm present.
Present,
Hello.
thank you. Emily Turner, are you present? Thank you. Board Member Bickford?
Present.
Board Member James Minor, I am present as well. Moving on to the minutes, has everyone
Mr.
had an
Chairman,
opportunity?
Let me read the statement first about the hybrid meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Minor. Good evening. I have just a few housekeeping items for the Zoom meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting unless you are speaking. The chat function for this meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to our moderator. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating in the meeting, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat to our moderator. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And I'll turn the meeting back over to Chair James Minor.
All right, thank you. Has everyone reviewed the minutes for November and October?
Yes.
Board Member Turner? I can't hear you.
Yes, sorry, apologize.
Board Member Bickford?
Yes.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
This board member Littleton, I would have to abstain on October since I was not present.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Speak up.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion was made to approve the minutes by Board Member Bickford. Would anyone else like to second that motion? I would like to second that motion then. Are there any changes or amendments to the meeting minutes for October and November? I mean, October and yes, November? Are there any changes or amendments to the October or November minutes? Board Member Littleton?
This board member Littleton, I'm not sure if we want to address this here because I'm not wanting to make any changes, but I do would like to ask for a follow-up from the November meeting minutes, in which I believe it was Sanjay and Jordan had discussed about the CPRB email address. I think that was left. I don't think that we actually came to a resolution on that.
Are there any other changes or amendments to the meetings, the minutes in October and November? All, Board Member Littleton?
I apologize, this board member Littleton. I would like to ask if this is okay. I would like to see added to the minutes as far as where it states who's present or absent. Any Lawrence Police Department representatives, have them added as well so we know who is at each meeting.
Okay.
Are you, Stephanie, you talking about like who's in the audience?
Correct, such as yourself and or Sergeant Casey Cooper or anybody else from the police department?
Okay.
Yes.
Would all those that are for the changes to the minutes and amendments say aye or nay? Board Member Littleton?
Aye.
Board Member Turner?
You said aye or nay for changes?
Yes.
Nay.
Board Member Bickford?
Point of order, we're asking to change these to
Yeah, do we
reflect
accept-
the
yeah,
police
mhm.
presence
Yes.
before we approve them?
No, I think what you're doing is voting to approve them. What Stephanie said
Yes.
is in the future, she'd like us to add
Yes.
that to the minutes.
So
So
there's
not-
not a current change to.
No, not a change.
No.
Yeah.
You
So we're
agree?
just approving them as is.
As is. Okay.
Can you check with Emily and make sure she understood that? I don't think she understood that.
Board Member Turner, do you understand that we're approving the minutes as is for November and October?
Right, correct. So I might have said it wrong. So I'm fine with how it is.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Board Member Minor, and I approve the minutes as is. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? Mr., please state your name.
I'd like to ask for an executive session discussing that personnel matter and extreme complaints with the chief of police. Don't look to the chief, please. You need to run this meeting, sir. You need to run this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, it's not permitted.
Yeah. It's not,
This board can take an executive session at any point they vote
Yes,
to
sir.
choose. And I think Ms. Bickford knows this. I think the other board members knows this. And I'm asking this board to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter, and it's under the personnel matter exclusions.
Executive sessions are only for the governing body, and they have to be coordinated in conjunction with
They
the
don't have to be
attorney's office.
coordinated. They are only for the governing body,
Yes.
And I hope this isn't taking up my public comment time, because I'm asking for an executive session. But he has no say-so in whether you take an executive session or not.
Executive session is not granted at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go ahead and make my public comment.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I have 3 minutes.
Mr. Minor, you might want to read the public comment
I want to make sure that
disclosure.
Rich doesn't get to interrupt me, and I want to make sure that Dave focuses in here on those pictures so that everybody can see them.
Mr. Ravi, let me read the public comment statement so we're
Sure.
all clear and
Thank you.
everything is all good on how we proceed.
It's your meeting, sir.
Okay. The public is allowed to speak at public comment after first being recognized by the chair, except that any complaints or comments regarding individually identifiable officers are not allowed. Rather, any such comments or complaints may be provided to the board in writing, and the board will forward such comment or complaint to the appropriate person within the Lawrence Police Department. The board may establish reasonable limitations on the allowable length of public comment. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes or less, as a courtesy of respect and safety to all participants. Outbursts, interruptions, antagonism, obscenities, and physical threats will not be tolerated. As a general practice, the board will not discuss or debate these items, nor will it make decisions on items presented during this time. You may proceed, Mr.
Hey, just so the other board members are aware, I handed a couple handouts to the 2 board members that are here right now, and it is unfortunate that we're again outnumbered by police in this meeting. But I handed a couple handouts to them, and Mr. Lockhart decided to demand a copy from me. And when I told him I wouldn't give him one, he decided to instruct your board members that they were not allowed to review anything that I gave them without giving him a copy. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the control that the police are assuming over this board. And you have a lot of nuts, Rich. I got to hand it to you because you're not even blatant about it. You're absurd about it.
You need to direct your comments to the board now.
You need to not speak during my public minutes.
Then talk to the board, not me.
Don't speak anymore during my public minutes.
Don't talk to me.
You want to instruct him to not speak during my public time?
Mr. Ravi, it has been stated that you do not point out particular.
I asked for an executive session, sir, and you wouldn't give it. This is what it looks like when a man is fully restrained in a wrap. I don't know if you know what the wrap is, but you should ask the police to show you how that device is used. This is what a man looks like when he's fully restrained and he's having some kind of a pressure point applied to him. These are the marks. And you need to ask Dave to focus in on these pictures so the public can see them. The public need to see these, Dave. Ask him to focus in on those pictures because the public needs to see them. They'll be in my video, but you're going to refuse to show the public. Our public needs to see what happens when a pressure point is misapplied and causes injuries to the person that shouldn't have even been arrested. He called the police coward-ass bitches, and they were so upset about that, they charged him with disorderly conduct over words. Over words. Words that are First Amendment protected. But these are the injuries. Has Dave focused in on this yet? Is he even going to show the public the pictures that are up here? He's not going to do it, is he? Okay. This is the bias in this city. You can't show the public. Here, Dave, I'll help you. These are the injuries. Where it's at. There it is, Dave. These are the injuries that a man gets. Quit. Where the fuck is the camera? Here it is. These are the injuries, Dave. You going to show it? There you go. Show it.
We see it.
These are the injuries that a guy gets from a pressure point in this town. When a cop comes in after a scene's been going for 53 minutes and he loses his cool in less than 9 and does that to somebody. That's your cops. Your cops. And your cops. That's how they act.
You have less than 30 seconds.
You have all the reports here. They lied in the reports. They didn't include the violence in the report. And then they filed an affidavit with the police. Were you about to say something?
It's time.
I'm going to leave these up here for y'all to consider.
Are there any other individuals that would like to make public comment?
It's like Stephen Watts, Britt.
Mr. Watts, you have the stage.
Thank you. Excuse me, I don't think my video is working today, but that's all right. You know, in dovetailing with this last discussion that was going on, if you can call it a discussion with respect to excessive force, is the issue of the data that I sent in, and hopefully you reviewed it, and that is sleep deprivation amongst the police. I don't understand why the questions just can't be simply answered with respect to what I asked. Is the guy who shot that man 17 times or unloaded his gun 17 times, was he sleep deprived? How many hours had he been on the job? I think it's a fair question during these excessive force matters to ask. How many hours have this guy on the job during the course? Is he sleep impaired? What's wrong with asking that question? And I don't understand why it can't get answered. Seriously. I mean, if this is supposed to be a dialogue back and forth, or is it just a dog and pony show? I don't know. But hopefully you read the data that I asked the questions in relation to. We need to have some standards with respect to hours and how many hours police can work in order to walk the streets of Lawrence, particularly if they're going to behave like this, sticking their thumbs on people's neck because they went to some G.I. Joe training and want to practice on somebody. It's not funny. Okay, that's what I have to say on that for right now. It's extemporaneous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Moving on to general public comment, Mr. Watts, you had two. I'm going to acknowledge them, Chief. You have two comments in there, January 23rd, and it looks like you might have touched on the police overtime. Do you have any more information you want to share on that, on those two issues you have cited?
You know, Mr. Minor, I appreciate your effort here because because originally I thought that you were asking for comment on the minute taking or, you know, the issues, and then you were going to move on to this public sector. So I appreciate the distinction, you know, thank you. At the same time, I got to say, hey, applauds to Ms. Littleton asking some hard questions. Yeah, who owns this board? Does the police department own this board as represented by the goddamn email address, which is a city email address as opposed to my boys in blue? It's a fair question, and thank you for bringing it up, because I would have just let it slide like I let all of the other issues slide that I bring up. All I do is ask questions. I own that. I'm a pea in a pod. I mean, a little guy out here asking stuff. I guess I'm the only one in Lawrence, Kansas, aside from Lawrence Accountability, that gives a rat's rear end about this stuff. Maybe I shouldn't. And, you know, I'm starting to realize more and more, if the public want the police running around beating the shit out of people, okay. You know, they don't need to act like pricks. Never. Okay, I use some French. All right. And then also bringing up Ms. Littleton, thank you. The number of police in the audience. I can't see from the Zoom meeting. How many cops are in that room, please? Three. Okay, well, this is going into what you guys are going to talk about here in a minute. So thank you, Mr. Minor.
Sir, do you realize you just engaged public comment?
Mr. Ravi, you've been warned. Do not speak out of turn. Do not speak out of turn. You've been warned. Moving on, do you have a public comment in regards to the Watts public comments?
Are you going to give me another 3 minutes?
Yes, I am.
Is that how that works?
Yes, I am.
Well, that's freaking awesome, man. Rich has given them so much overtime that they're just tore up on the street, I guess. That's what Stephen's uncovering for you. I think this is absurd the way this meeting is running. I mean, I got to be honest with you, and I mean no disrespect because you haven't disrespected me during this meeting, but this is not the way the meeting's supposed to work. And just so that I can put it on the record, now we have 4 cops here and 2 CPRB members. But this isn't the way this is supposed to work. We're supposed to have 3 minutes each. You're not supposed to engage, and it's supposed to be over with. But we can't, I mean, so really, we need to get this meeting running the way it's supposed to run, and we need to not let them have control of it. And we need to have you guys understand what your responsibilities are, not only to them, to the city, but to us, the citizens. We have rights that are being trampled on every day. And you guys continue to talk and run meetings that I don't even know what's going on here.
You have time. Thank you, sir. Moving on to updates from the subgroups and subcommittees. Start with the Community Engagement Committee. I've reached out to a couple of groups. I won't mention their names because they have not totally, well, we have one that has agreed to hear from the police chief and in a normal presentation, so that's a good thing. I reached out to another group, and they said that they would let me know. And I think the positive thing here is that we get an opportunity for the board as well as the police department to reach out to those groups and let them know their feelings on status and answer any questions that they may have regarding police activity and things that and opportunities that we should improve. One of the things there is that we have heard in various meetings where there's questions of different activities. So we want to hear from other folks on what their feelings are on that. And that's all I have on the engagement committee, because right now that is just me. Moving on to the CPRB Workgroup, Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Morris, and I have been hired by the City Manager's Office to provide professional facilitation services in support of the City Commission's charter through the form of the Community Police Oversight Work Group. And so I'm here to give just a quick update and preview the work that we'll be doing with the 12 members of the work group that will be convening very shortly. So just for a little bit of context, so the CPRB has identified over the past year the need to clarify the Police Review Board complaint process. And so the city put out an RFP to identify facilitator services needed to work with 12 members identified to serve as a work group that will meet for approximately 3 months and with 3 distinct purposes. One is to review the complaint review process as it currently is. Does it work? Is it well understood? Is it accessible? Does it accomplish what we need it to accomplish? The second task that's been identified for the work group is to review the structure of the CPRB itself, to clarify the oversight authority or review authorities established within the review board, and to provide whatever supports to make it a more effective entity. I would just also add that the city is looking at all boards and committees to look at optimal ways of functioning and restructuring those. This is an effort that is distinct from that, but certainly would be informed by that work as well. The third function is looking at the need for support in general related to the review board, and making sure that whatever work is done here is productive and instills trust in the community and the community's trust in all efforts related to the police department. So to further that end, the members of the work group are 8 members of the community and 4 members of the police department. This was determined by the CPRB and then approved by the City Commission. And so the work that we've been convened to do, and Jonathan Morris Consulting is contracted with the City Manager's Office, so we're working directly with the City Manager to do this work. I have 2 independent facilitators who also do professional work that I've worked with for 10 years now, who have expertise in local government, and the 3 of us have begun to interview the members of the work group, and will be facilitating a series of sessions with these 12 members of the work group. In those interviews, we have been asking to get clarification on what's their interest in serving, what is their perspective as a community member on the effectiveness of the CPRB, their perceptions of the complaint review process, and then specifically the context for which the police department and community relations inform the work that we do. And so as facilitators, our role is to reflect back what we learned from that process, and we will have a first meeting of the work group here in about 3 weeks. And at that point, we'll share what are the perceived strengths, weaknesses of the process itself. Where does it work? Where is it breaking down? We'll have a report out on themes that we hear, insights gained, and then the services that we'll be providing are to facilitate a series of engagements. And so those will not be this typical kind of board meeting like this. These are facilitated engagements. They're structured differently. They're facilitated. We will have active dialogue throughout. So in anticipation of each meeting, there will be an agenda. These are public meetings. There will be an agenda produced. There will be a clear set of tasks to cover during that meeting. We will have discussion time, and all of those ideas and inputs will be documented throughout that work and then reflected back to the group in the form of the next stage. So these are iterative processes. It's work that builds on itself. So before the next engagement of the work group, they will be presented with a summation of the work from the prior group, and then presented with a new set of discussion questions to further that work. This group has a beginning and it has an end. At the end of that work, the work group will be producing a set of recommendations to the CPRB and ultimately to the City Commission on what improvements need to be made to, first and foremost, the complaint review process. So they will weigh in on a number of items that will be identified through this group of community members and the 4 members of the police department that also serve on the work group. They will be, our role as facilitators is distinct from that of consultants. So when the city needs expertise in a particular area and engages a consultant to come in, do a set of interviews, write up a report, and then make a set of recommendations, that's a consulting engagement that's distinct from a facilitation engagement. So the work product from this effort of the work group will be from the 12 members of the work group, the 8 community members, and the 4 police officers. So the work that I do and my team is to facilitate their efforts going forward. Facilitation includes the planning and structure of those conversations. It includes asking provocative and difficult questions of everyone from the community related to their work, and it involves provocative and difficult questions that help further the efforts addressed to the police department. And so ultimately, that effort of the 12 members of the work group will be to produce a set of recommendations that will ultimately seek to improve the complaint review process as it currently is established, make recommendations for changes and enhancements relative to that, as well as recommendations on the structure, operation, needed support to enable the Community Police Review Board itself to be as effective as possible. And the additional component then is that the CPRB previously drafted an ordinance, a draft ordinance, for consideration by the City Commission. And so the work group will also review that, provide feedback, and a set of recommendations relative to that, that proposed revision to the ordinance. Ultimately, that work will be presented back to the CPRB. So the CPRB can weigh in on that, And then, as I understand it, the City Commission, then there would be a presentation to the City Commission as well. So part of the work that I will be doing with my team is to facilitate those sets of discussions among the work group to make sure that they're getting the resources that they need, to be a sounding board for what the community is saying about the board and the complaint review process, to reflect that back to the group for communication and clarification, and then also to be working with those members of the police department who serve on the work group to pose questions to them for clarification on the review process and reflect that back as well. So ultimately, at the end of that process, the work group will have a set of recommendations to present for the board and the city commission to take action on. And along the way, whatever needs they have to further that work is exactly what we're here for. And so we live in the middle of that work. We help design it. We provide feedback and make adjustments accordingly. I just want to say a little bit about the background and the skill sets that we bring to this and to inform that work. And then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this. And I want to say a little bit about the updates for our work group members themselves.
Please continue.
So collectively, we have more than 25 years of professional facilitation experience. I also am a resident of Lawrence. I've lived here approximately 21 years. I have a vested interest in the success of whatever comes out of this because I'm a beneficiary or recipient of the services that we receive in the community from any number of city government services as well as the police department itself. That being said, I'm also a community member, and 15 years ago I couldn't have told you anything about how a police department operates or works. It was a mystery to me. My goal was to not get pulled over and not engage in any other way, and otherwise not have a real sense of what that work looked like. Over the last 20 years, when I moved to Lawrence, I was hired by the KU Public Management Center in 2003 to provide consulting and training services through the KU Public Management Center. And over that time, I have worked with more than 25,000 public sector employees. I've worked with city managers all over the state of Kansas. I've served in and worked with leaders and public sector employees in all 105 counties in Kansas. And during that time, I was paid a salary by the university to provide training and facilitation services that generated value for public sector entities. And when I initially started the work, we would have police commanders, police chiefs, sheriffs in some of our management training courses. And over those years, as my training portfolio grew, I became more and more involved in providing facilitation and training services for law enforcement departments. And so over that time, it's given me a unique perspective on a number of departments throughout the state of Kansas and in various parts of the country, and ramp up training services. So as someone who provides facilitation, instructional design, training, I'm interested in not only how do you create great processes that produce great results, but also how do you identify professional training services that ensure that the public receives quality, competent service from any number of public sector entities. And so I'm also very actively involved in training and development and facilitating among subject matter experts in law enforcement to provide high-quality law enforcement services. So the three of us as facilitators each bring different experiences, expertise. Two of my colleagues are based in Kansas City, one of whom is a KU grad who's lived in Lawrence. And the three of us have been interviewing the work group members up to this point. One of the things I know as a facilitator is that we each bring our own expertise, we each bring our own personal experience and perspectives. And so I actively seek out co-facilitators on projects because they also bring different strengths and perspectives. And so we try to leverage that in the work that we do. I'd also just point out that when the CPRB and the City Commission identified the need for a work group, they also identified the need to be very intentional about engaging a majority community members to serve on the work group. So thus you have twice as many community members as police officers on the work group. There's also a concerted effort and an intentionality in the charter for this work group and in the approach that we used to make sure that marginalized and traditionally underrepresented populations within the community are actively represented in the work of the work group, in the perspectives, and in the feedback that is gathered throughout that process. And so that is a very active part of the discussion in the interviews that we've had in terms of identifying stakeholders, as well as in the design of the engagement itself. So that gives you some context for the work. I think that we have any number of data points to suggest that from the city's perspective, CPRB's perspective, the work group members' perspective, the police department's perspective, we need to find better ways to do the work that we're doing, and that we need to be thoughtful, we need to be informed in that, we need to have the right resources, we need to be asking more of our community to weigh in on that, and we need to have a thoughtful and well-developed process in order to act upon that. And so that's the work that we're here to do. So at the first community police oversight work group meeting, the first work group meeting, we'll do a formal presentation of what this work will be. So all of this will be available to the public. We will actively host all the working documents and work products through the city's website that represents the work group itself. We are tentatively looking at Monday, January 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. as the first convening of the work group. We are finalizing details. I'm right now asking the city to send out some additional updates to the work group members themselves. We have already interviewed, as I mentioned, the members. We have 2 changes to the work group, and so those additional members, which is 1 additional police officer that has not been a part of the process. One we interviewed before is not on the work group, and so we're interviewing that individual's replacement. And then there's action, as I understand it, on this CPRB board of a decision that needs to be made about who the 3rd representative of the CPRB will be in the work group process itself. So those 2 individuals will be interviewed sometime prior. We didn't want to convene the work group before we had the opportunity to interview everyone that would be serving in that group. And a huge part of any facilitated process is all of the pre-work that happens before you convene. If you just throw a group of folks into a room, it's not necessarily going to get you what you need. And so we're very much close to wrapping up that first phase of our work. And the more exciting work for everyone else and the more visible work is when we're in the room to tackle challenging questions, but critically important work that we all have a vested interest in. So at that point, I'm happy to answer if you have any questions on this, and then I would just alert you all to the formal presentation that will come at the first work group meeting when we convene as a group.
And this is Board Member Minor. I have a few questions, and after that, we'll open it up to the rest of the board members and then to public comment. But my few questions are, the first date is scheduled for the 30th of January. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
And
our
then after that, will those, do we have hard set dates for, of the remaining or the other dates?
Yeah, so we are actively seeking the availability of all the work group members. So we're floating at it the 30th. When we did our interviews, we asked specifically what days work best for you.
Yeah.
And generally, Mondays seem to be the best, but we need confirmation from each of the members for that. So they're getting an email, either it's going out either today or will go out tomorrow morning, asking for clarification on that. All dates of the work group meeting will be posted. Our preference is to schedule them all the way out through the end of our work so that everyone can plan their meetings accordingly. We're not going to change dates. We're not going to do things at the last minute. This is important work. It's difficult work, and there is a sequence of it. And so we need to have clarity on when those dates are so that people can plan their schedules to be there accordingly. But also we can do all the work prior to each meeting to make sure that the work group members have in front of them what they need to have, and that we've had ample opportunity to summarize what's been developed up to that point. So once we have that, all those dates will be published for everyone to be made aware of.
Are there any other questions
Stephanie has
to the board member?
questions.
Who?
Stephanie has her hand.
Board Member Littleton, you have to.
Yeah, thank you. This is Board Member Littleton. Jonathan, thank you first and foremost for that presentation. Really do appreciate all of that. I do have a series of questions. I would like to ask, you had mentioned that there are 2 changes to the members. Can we possibly gain some clarification on that, Jonathan?
Yes, so the one change is that the makeup of the work group itself, there are 8 community members, 3 of whom are community board CPRB representatives. And so I understand that you've had some recent resignations from this board.
Yes.
And so one of the individuals we already interviewed has since resigned, and so I believe that you all are going to have a discussion about who the 3rd member will be to serve officially on the board. So that's one. The other change in terms of membership, of the 4 police officers that are identified as, or the 4 slots, if you will, among the 12 work group, 2 of them are members of the Lawrence Police Officers Association, and there was an election and leadership change with that role, and so the individual voted in at the most recent election is serving on the work group as well. And so so that will be our new addition to the work group.
And who, can we get the name of who that will be?
I believe
It's Ian McCann.
it's Officer Ian McCann.
Taking the place, I'm sorry, for who?
Casey Wiltz.
Casey?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, appreciate that. As you mentioned, Jonathan, yeah, we will discuss here probably for the end of the meeting. I've got that kind of on my notes to talk about for replacement of one of our board members. I wanted to ask, you'd mentioned, Jonathan, also, the notes what you'd said. You listed out, and not to reiterate all of what kind of the main responsibilities of the group are, because you went through those, but you mentioned one that I had not heard of, the need for support in general for the review board to instill trust in the community. I was part of the group that worked on the charter, and I don't believe that was part of it. I'm not against this per se, I'm just asking, is this an addition that was added?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. No, to be precise, and when we do our formal presentation, that will be made more explicit, so I appreciate you asking that to clarify. The three areas, one is the review of the complaint review process itself and the feedback related to that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Point of order, you two
This-
are not engaged. I'd like to know what's going on between the three of you.
Please continue, Jonathan.
The second is specific to the role and structure of the CPRB itself, and the third is the proposed revised ordinance. And so my earlier comments related to community trust is more of, is the bedrock, if you will, for all of the work that we do. And so it's not an added element as much as it is a foundation for this work. Because ultimately, the work product from the work group will have a set of recommendations, but it's in the spirit of, have we created a process that the community can be confident in, that if they have a complaint to bring forward, that that complaint is handled, that it's clear on how it's being handled, and that there is the representative communication, the feedback necessary. If there's adjustments that should be considered to that process, what are those? And that would come out of that. Similarly, the functioning of the CPRB and its role, does that also support and infuse a confidence in the public in the work that's being done here, and ultimately to support the efforts of that? And so that's yet another foundation. And if not, where do we need to make recommendations accordingly? And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Thank you.
No, I appreciate, I didn't mean for you to have to, because obviously you're going to go through that in the formal introduction. I didn't really kind of think ahead on that. I just, when you said that, I wasn't familiar with that. So, but I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate this. Absolutely, it's the foundation, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I do have additional questions.
Oh, please continue,
Sorry.
Member Littleton.
Okay, I just wanted to gain clarification, Jonathan, when you had completed the interview process with the members for this work group.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Yeah, I'm just wanting to understand or get kind of a clarification when your consulting group completed interviews with the members of this work group.
Yeah, so we commenced the interviews in October, and then completed our last interview in November. There was some uncertainty as to the final community member in that process, and so we had sought to get clarification on, is there an additional person that we would need to be interviewing at that point. And then it was right around that same time that we had a change in the LPOA representative. So that was something that we want to get resolved, and I'm hoping we'll have clarity on that tonight, because we were very intent on not convening the work group itself if we didn't have everybody already identified.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That makes sense. So then we were upon holidays, so I really wanted to get clarification on that, Jonathan, since a number of community members and myself were wondering why there was a delay. But we were certainly getting quite a few, questions asked by the community. And I think that's something good that the folks understand, that there were additional challenges to getting through the interviews and such, and then we had holidays.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I hear two things from that. One is I appreciate the interest. One of the things that we were struck by doing the interviews is the commitment, the passion for serving on this. These folks are motivated. They have a lot to bring. They have a lot to share. We're going to be the beneficiaries of their good work. And so I hear that. I also hear we didn't do a good job of communicating our process and where we're at. And so that's a lesson learned. And it's also, I think, a challenge in this work that as a work group, we will engage around is what do we need to do better to communicate to the community, to the public, the work that is being done, the work that we are doing, to acknowledge when we haven't done that well, and to make better for the public and for all the stakeholders impacted by this work. So, so that's definitely a major takeaway from that as well.
Yes, absolutely. For some folks that are newer on this call to the CPRB in itself, this has been a long, long road to get to this point, Jonathan. And I, for most of all, have been here the longest. I'm extremely excited to get this moving, to bring the community folks to the table, to make this all, a centralized joint effort to bring everybody that needs to be there, the LPOA, the police department, the community, ourselves to the table and talk through these very important topics. So.
Yeah, and I would also just share, I get the opportunity to work with a lot of different cities, a lot of different police departments. I've worked with a lot of different entities, and there are good practices that we do in this city that I see in other cities that support and enable the work of concerned community members to volunteer their time, to offer their perspective, to put themselves out there to make tough decisions and tackle challenging issues. And there are good practices, there are best things that we can do to enable that work and support that work. And then there are examples where we fall short. We haven't done well, it's not structured right, we're not giving it the right supports. People come in with mixed messages or differing perspectives on the work that needs to be done. I think that part of the interest in this work here is not only are these difficult challenges broadly, anything related to police and community relations is a whole set of challenges that we can learn from this process and others, and reflect on good work that's been done in this community prior in that area as well. So not only are those challenges, but then also, once we bring people together, what do we need to do to make sure that they can be effective in the roles that they're in? And when people commit themselves to something and either their work is muddled, it's less clear, it's not supported, it's at counter purposes, they're hearing it from every direction, that's discouraging, it's counterproductive, it's disrespectful of people's time and effort, and it makes it that much more difficult to increase community confidence in the work that we do and to support the good efforts of folks trying to do good work. And so one of my hopes, and as facilitators, our hopes for all of you, is that we can help equip the work group and ultimately this board and the city broadly with some of the tools, the techniques, some of the professional practices that enable that kind of success. And as someone who does professional development and training for a living, any project that I touch, I like to incorporate some kind of professional development component to that so that anybody who experiences that walks away with something useful that not only makes their current work better and more effective, but they also have tools that will be of value to them in other endeavors as well. And so hopefully we're able to create the context for that, to emulate that, share some of our experience, and that we'll all be the beneficiaries of that accordingly.
Thank you, absolutely. I think I may have just one or two other questions, Jonathan.
You give
just
one more. Give one more, Board Member Littleton. We want other board members to have some.
Just, I'm not sure if you have this worked out, Jonathan, but are we looking at 2 meetings per month? I think that's what we originally had discussed.
Yeah, thank you for that. So when this was conceived, as I understand it, originally, The idea was 2 meetings per month, not weekly engagements. Because it's taken so long to get that initially launched and then the finalization of the work group members, we will have to look at that scheduling. We have busy people. We want to be respectful of their time commitments and schedule it out accordingly. So that will be an active discussion, and we'll take direction from the members in terms of what's realistic. I believe when this was originally scoped out, it was through the end of March.
Okay.
And so we would not be able to go every other week. If that were the case, that would potentially push it into April. But this is not a standing committee, so it will have an end. So we need to be clear about what our end is so we can work back accordingly to make sure we complete our work.
And Stephanie, if we need to extend it, we can. That was just what was in the original agreement, so we just would have to modify the agreement to be able to go beyond March if we needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, we truly appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks for answering all my questions, and we look forward to working with you.
Moving on, does Board Member Bickford or Turner have any questions?
I think, I don't have questions at this point, but I think we have some points of discussion.
Okay. Board Member Turner?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing, Jonathan. You said you would be emailing out tomorrow to the work group members for scheduling, correct?
Yes, so there will be, I've already written an email, and just, Member Turner, I'll just give you the quick highlights. Just some quick information about updates to the interviews and the follow-up. And recognition that there were some additional changes to the membership itself since we first completed the interviews. I do also just want to say, as someone who does facilitation and is used to a room full of folks doing important work together, it was an absolute delight to interview our members so far. After each, our facilitation team would debrief. We're looking at themes and insights that are coming from that. We want everybody together, and so I'm very excited to just finally make that happen. But that's been a fun part of the process, and as we reflect back to those who've been interviewed about themes that we heard, what's really not working that people feel really strongly about, you're going to hear about that. Where we're maybe doing some things right, you'll hear about that, and a whole lot of thoughts on what we need to do better. So you'll be hearing all of that, but I'm just eager to be able to engage with all of you around that conversation. The next piece in the email is about January 30th, asking if will work for folks and the options, with some initial information about the agenda items as well. And then just a comment about, this was not originally part of our plan to talk with the CPRB before we had our first meeting.
Okay.
So that's why you're going to get a formal presentation as a work group. And for those of you in the review board, you'll be the beneficiaries of that after the fact. I was just asked to come in and give an update here.
And as
so you'll get the formal presentation at that point, and I just wanted to reference that in the email as well.
So just to be clear, we're going to get notification in a few days, is that correct?
Yeah, you should be getting an email tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay. I have a question. We have, being such a small board right now and losing the members, would it be open to have 2 more on there if they choose to be? 2 more, because currently it's Board Member Littleton and myself.
No.
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
There's a whole process that goes into creating the work group and a whole series of discussions that I'm was brought in well after the fact, but I can surmise and also go back and I'm sure look at both CPRB discussions and City Commission discussions of how this group was constructed, exactly how many positions would be on each. And so it was identified that there would be 3 and only 3 from the Community Police Review Board. Because, and I think part of the logic to that is that this is community heavy by design. And so when you start tweaking with that, then you begin to compromise some of the other things already. And when you're talking about community trust and process and things like that, people naturally question who's on the board, who has control, who's driving the agendas, who's you bringing in to facilitate this. Like, all those are to be expected when you're trying to establish public trust. And so the intentionality of how it's structured, who's on there, and how that process is facilitated as a distinct work group separate from this is all driven from that.
So, I don't know if this is the opportunity to determine who else would take that 3rd seat. I know we had Tanya Salvini that was in that 3rd seat, but she's having some problems, and I haven't reached out to her to get more information if she would be present for that. So I don't know from the board members who would like to assume that 3rd position.
Right.
I don't know if you want to draw straws, flip coins.
Jonathan,
Discussed
I'm
last
sorry.
week that I would fill
Deck of
that
cards,
role.
huh?
We had discussed last week that I would fill that role.
Okay, so that would be Board Member Bickford.
Could you clarify what's occurring right now? I'm sorry.
What's occurring right now, Board Member Turner, is determining who that 3rd person would be to replace Board Member Salvini for the work group. And Bickford, Board Member Bickford had said that there had been discussion or agreement that she would take that position. Is that correct, Board Member Bickford?
We just discussed that last week, but if we need to make that an action item here.
We talked about during agenda review that we were going
Yeah.
to discuss it here. I don't know that we made a decision about you being the person.
Yeah. So,
Jonathan, I just have a clarification question. With the interviews, with everyone that you interviewed, was that part of the process, or how did you go about determining the selection for the work group for the CPRB?
Yeah, thank you. So that was part of the confusion for us as interviewers back in November when we completed our last interview, is which were the official 3 representatives to the that would be serving on the work group. And so we interviewed Member Turner at that time, and our understanding at the time was that was coming to us not as a CPRB board member, because I think that that had just occurred just after or just prior to that. And so that was one of the issues that I raised, is who will be the 3 if we now have 4 people for interviews. And so that was one of the issues that we needed clarification on. So as I understand it, Member Turner, we've interviewed Member Salvini, who, as I understand, has now resigned. We have also interviewed Member Littleton, and we've interviewed Member Minor. So I believe that the discussion would be, if I may, that the board needs to determine who that 3rd person is, and if you were to determine that it's Member Turner, we've already interviewed her and we'd be good to go. If you determine that it's Member Bickford, then we would just need to complete that interview and make decisions accordingly. Irrespective, we appreciate the opportunity to meet Member Turner as she's new to the board, and all of her input is extremely valuable to this process and a great asset to the board.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you interviewed Board Member Turner before she was a board member.
I don't know what officially happened when. I just know we were given a name and number and had a great interview.
I was interviewed, I'm sorry, with respect to Mr. Minor, I was interviewed after already becoming a board member and being at the board meeting in October. Thank you.
Okay.
I think what happened was I notified Jonathan we had a new CPRB member, and I think there may have been a misunderstanding that she was just new to the board, not new to the work group, and that's why the interview took place.
Oh, okay.
So when Jonathan called me to say, hey, I've got 4 CPRB people now, that's when we discovered that he had interviewed her thinking she was going to be on the work group. Instead, I was just notifying him we had a new board member.
Oh,
Okay, you went on in.
okay.
So then if Board Member Turner serves as a CPRB person, do you need another general community member to serve?
Yeah, thank you. That's a question I have because I'm not sure. Yes, there is another.
There's another open
Another
space.
seat.
Well, I don't know the answer to that. We've already circled back because an individual was identified earlier in the process and hadn't responded to earlier inquiries for an interview. So we didn't know if that meant we had a scheduling issue, if the individual is no longer interested, and if there would be a replacement for that position. So, but we wanted to honor that original commitment, so that's been in holding.
So this is Board Member Littleton. Jonathan, if I understand it right, we should have 8 community members, 3 from the board, 5 otherwise, and we only have 4 of those clarified, or that are interviewed anyway. So we still have 1 spot for that, if I'm following you right. Okay, so we really don't have the 12 total quite in place.
Yeah.
And I see some holdbacks with that because if we interview, we have an open space, we have Board Member Turner that's already been interviewed for the position. One could sit in one position and one could sit in the other, or we all be group.
No.
I don't know, but that's a no.
I think that we need to recruit another community member at large.
Okay.
So you
That-
interviewed, I mean, for the sake of efficiency in moving this process forward, it would behoove us maybe to go ahead and move forward with the 3 board members who have already been interviewed, and then select 1 more community member at large,
Okay.
right? Is that what we need to do?
Well, yeah, in terms of efficiency with this board, that would be because then we would have already interviewed 3 members.
Right.
In terms of the additional community member, that's an active conversation that should be resolved here, and I'm just waiting for direction on that. So that's not work that's the CPRB's at this point. But the city's aware that we just need to get that resolved. And these are the kinds of things that are frustrating to us because we want to just get everybody in the room and get to the work. It's also emblematic of when we create frustrations for the public who are well-intentioned, that want to contribute, and then we have challenges like this that frustrate that process. So
it sounds like we have the 3. It sounds like Littleton, myself, and Turner have been interviewed. Is that?
And this board member, Stephanie Littleton, if I may kind of just step in here for a second, I wanted to gain clarification. I don't know if this is from Casey to me or from the chief, but I do know, kind of stepping backward for a second, that Tanya Salvini, in her resignation, asked if she could possibly continue on with the work group. I don't know her status at this time, but I don't know if that's even a possibility based on her resignation. So can we get some clarification on that?
Stephanie, it's not a possibility for a CPRB rep. It would be possible for her to be a community rep, but then you still have that dynamic Jonathan was describing with having a group that's heavily weighted in one direction. The community member was appointed by one of our city commissioners. So right now what we're doing is working with that commissioner to see if we can identify a new appointment. And we only learned today that the person was not going to be able to serve. So we are working on getting that person, working with the city commission to get that person replaced. And so we'll get that to Jonathan just as soon as we get that person identified.
So in the grand scheme of things, we have the three, Turner, Littleton, and Minor. So we're covered there regarding the board. Do you have a problem with being on this work group, Board Member Turner?
It's not that I have an issue. I think my broader concern is the diversity of the work group. I wouldn't have a problem if the other board member wanted to be on the work group. I just am concerned, Jonathan, about you talked about it being weighted in one direction for the CPRB, but what about the representation of the community within the group? The diversity of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you'll have, I believe you have access to the list of names already. That's on the city website. And so if you don't know each of the individuals, we're happy to share whatever we can. I'll just share from having met everyone. It is an impressive group with a variety of backgrounds. It is a racially diverse group. It is an ethnically diverse group that in our interviews, people have, as I mentioned earlier, very much understood and embraced and championed, if you will, the charter expectation that that diversity of our community, with a particular emphasis on those underrepresented or marginalized and disproportionately impacted by the law enforcement or criminal justice system, are represented through the representation of the community members. And so that is very much honored, I think, in the selections that the CPRB, the city commissioners have made in who they've put forward to serve on the board. So I know that that's important to the credibility of the work and to meet the expectations of the charter. So that's something that we've been tracking and just making observations of as well. And those kinds of decisions are part of your selection process. The reality of it isn't realized until you're all in the room and you kind of understand who's there and what perspectives are coming from. So
here's another look, another way that I see it. We have, unless Board Member Turner is kind of hesitant to be on the work group, and we have board members.
I don't think that's what she
Okay,
said.
I'm
Okay, yeah,
summarizing what I'm hearing. And then we have Bickford that hasn't been interviewed, and then we have another individual that may be coming in through the city commission that has to be interviewed. So my question is, will there, is there going to be any hold up to not meeting that January 30th date?
I hope not.
Yeah, see, that's
Right, so that's
We-
going to be
we
on the
gotta-
city to expedite that process,
Okay.
right? And you guys are working on
The
that?
meeting is going to happen.
Yeah, we got to meet.
This will not affect the meeting.
Okay.
The interview he's got to do with the officer, that officer can be interviewed anytime. Jonathan was hoping to get both of them done at the same time, like separately, but on the same day, because his consultants have to come in from Kansas City. So the idea was to get the community appointment made, schedule that interview the same day as the interview with the officer, and then if you guys decided to appoint Jordan, then the interview with her could be scheduled that same day as well, so they could, from an efficiency standpoint, get it all done. But the community appointment's not going to hold up the first meeting. We'll get it done.
Okay, that answers that.
This is Board Member Littleton. Sorry, James. I just want to step back to the point that was made about being heavily weighted. I'm not sure if I'm following why that matters that we not have all four of us, because we're all community members. Going back to the fact that we are community members. Ms. Turner especially is brand new on this board, so not like she's had a lot of time adverse, if you would call that, to be on the CPRB, to be one of the representatives. I'm not sure why we, unless there's further clarification to be had here, why at this point, why we need to go seek somebody else outside. Once again, we're community members. There's four of us. So I guess I would ask to help clarify that, because I'm not sure what we're heavily weighted on. If we can't, like, we could not have the four of us.
I think the question here, Stephanie, is Commissioner Littlejohn appointed somebody, and we need to work with him to identify a replacement for his appointment.
Okay.
And so, you know, I don't know that it would be appropriate for us or this board to say, this is the person who it's going to be. And then if you remember when we did the board approved this work plan and the work group, there were only going to be 3 CPRB members. So, you know, we would be kind of changing the rules in the middle of the game.
Okay. And I understand what you're saying, Chief. I do have some differences about how that played out. I think I brought those to your attention. My understanding was that we were not going to have more than 3 board members, so we would not have a quorum, and then we would have not open. The meetings would not be open. But since it's an open meeting, it should not matter how many board members we have on it. It's really more about back to how many in totality that we are just going to land for this work group. So, so I'm not sure where to end that,
But it being said, it being an open meeting, and
it's going to, yeah, it's going to be an open meeting, so that's where we land with having only 3. That's not what the city.
It wouldn't be like someone is excluded. Like, for example, myself, if I'm not on that board, but I would be able to listen in, and I would be able to provide viewpoint. Because I'm also thinking on the aspect of experience and gaining experience in regards to the board and new members coming on and other things like that. So with an open meeting, someone is not being left out on this board or in the community on the activities going forward in regards to the work group. Would that be fair to say? Because they're listening in and participating?
That's fair. This board member Littleton, I do think one other thought just came to mind, because we did agree to have other board members as backup. I do think it maybe, not to put more work on Jonathan, but I think it's probably in the best interest to have Jordan interviewed, because we may likely have to have a backup. And that's probably in the best thing to do.
And that's a good point, and I agree with that, because you just never know what happens in the future. Example is Board Member Salvini or Miche or anyone. So if it's possible, could it be possible to have Board Member Bickford interviewed as well and be as a backup?
So let me just draw a distinction between getting input from people, them observing through a public meeting that anyone can, as opposed to serving in an official role.
Okay.
So that's the clear delineation of who's an official member needs to be preserved throughout, because you create other problems for yourself. This work needs to be informed. The work group needs the information they need to make good decisions and be informed. People who serve on this board have experience with what works, a lot of experience with what's not working, and that input needs to be a part of that discussion. And so there's other ways to do that other than formally serving on the board itself. And part of the role that we have as facilitators too is to engage with the 12 members of the work group on what kinds of processes do we need to create to get that kind of input that we need. And so so that's part and parcel. We just need clarity, we need emails, and we need to sit down and interview the rest of the folks so that we can convene this group.
So I don't know if we need to put it to a motion or anything like that, but does any of the board members have a problem, and I'm going to point out Board Member Turner, of her being on the replacing Board Member Salvini? Does anyone?
This board member Littleton, before we go to that point, James, I just wanted to clarify to Jonathan and the chief, my concern is I know I have quite a bit of vacation in February, and I know you as well, James, are going to be gone some. So how best do we manage that, Jonathan, if one of us is not present for a meeting or possibly 2?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So we, in the email that you'll get, I've asked if you can communicate any major scheduling challenges that you have. We will likely need to do a doodle poll or something with a number of potential dates. I will say this, Member Littleton, this is a time-limited project. As I mentioned before, it has a beginning and an end. So we want people present and engaged. Folks are busy. There are other realities in life, and we need to be able to work with that. And so we will work with that. Where it becomes a problem if somebody's going to miss 2 meetings or 3 meetings, then suddenly we're not getting their input. All that they bring, all the criticisms, the critiques they have of the process don't get figured in to the discussion, and then that's just a loss and a wasted opportunity, missed opportunity. So if I would just ask you and for everyone to give us what kind of schedule conflicts you anticipate in over the next few months, and that we will do our best to schedule accordingly. We did note that Monday evenings seem to be the best for the majority of the group, but in my email I'm asking to reflect back and react to that and tell us if their schedules have changed otherwise, and if we need to maybe schedule a series of Mondays and then a few of them are Tuesdays or whatever the case may be. We'll do that. We just need to make sure that it works and it's scheduled out and everyone can plan accordingly.
Not to push the discussion too much longer, because I know we have other issues to tackle, but I do agree with the fact of having a backup board member and interviewing. I mean, from my line of experience, I cannot see how it's going to hurt. I do not see, because I'm not going to talk about my personal experience with situations, but I recently came into one where it could make me miss a Monday or two. And I'm not going to say Board Member Bickford and I think on the same page on those things, but it would be nice to, I trust her judgment, I hope she trusts mine, that she could step in and represent the board without the board itself, without the work group being impeded by that. And, you know, having an alternate member sitting in there would be great, in my opinion. We don't need to go further than that. Right now, it seems like we have Turner, Minor, and Littleton. And then the question is the candidate from Commissioner Littlejohn. And
Correct. So to move this forward, we have our 3 board members who have all been interviewed. We need an additional community member that you're working on.
Right.
And you're going to send out a doodle poll for scheduling, and if it becomes apparent that one of our CPRB members will not be available for the duration, then we can come back to the idea of swapping somebody out. But for now, I think we're set on what we need to do to move forward.
I agree.
Thank you.
So moving forward.
Stephanie, Board Member
Stephanie, Board
Littleton
Member
has a comment.
Board Member Littleton?
Sorry, this is Board Member Littleton. I just asked Jordan, would you prefer to throw your name in the hat? Because, I don't have a concern either one of you to be on there. I mean, I'd like to have all of us on there, but I want you to have a fair shot if you would wish to put your name in there.
I trust each of you to participate in this process and to bring your perspectives. I also trust that if I had input on that process, and I could have a discussion with you. And so I think for the sake of efficiency and moving this process forward and not making the community wait any longer, we have 3 interviews done with people who are ready to serve in this role. So it would be my preference that we move forward at this point.
So this is Board Member Minor. It sounds like we have our 3, but Board Member Littleton, you have another comment? Is that correct?
I just want to kind of wrap up, and I'm sorry, Jonathan, this has been so long. I didn't mean for it to be. I just want to kind of instill one thought. Kind of ultimately, once we come through this work group and the work is completed, just food for thought for our board, that the working group is meant to provide recommendations to us, as Jonathan has mentioned. We ultimately will be responsible for taking that information and making a final analysis that we will draft up regarding our ordinance that we have been working on for so long and taking it to the city commission. So it's our ultimate decision from those recommendations. So just keep that in mind, that that is ours to do. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. Policy Committee. Any updates from the Policy Committee? Ms. Bickford, Board Member Bickford?
We do not have any updates. We were not able to coordinate a schedule, and we've also lost Tonya on
Yes.
our subgroup. So I know Board Member Turner had expressed some interest in serving in one of the subgroups, and I'm not sure if we've determined that, but we don't have an update from the last month.
So our current standing on committees is, Board Member Littleton, are you on a committee?
Yes, I'm on the policy committee.
You're on the Policy Committee. So that's two on one side. Board Member Turner, are you interested in joining me on the Engagement Committee?
That's fine.
Okay, so we got it.
So we've got you and Emily on community engagement, and then Jordan and Stephanie will be policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, man, that went smooth as silk. So let's,
Except this board member Littleton, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with all that. I was just going to add at this point on the agenda on this very topic that unless something comes up in the interim, we might want to consider, I mean, we can meet and talk about it, but we may want to consider putting some of the committee work on hold as we are starting this work group
that is,
work, and we're trying to get back up to speed with 7 members on this board because we have so many limitations. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but I'm just throwing out some thoughts on that.
and I agree with you because, this is Board Member Minor, I agree with you because right now that work group is the main is one of the main focuses though. But, you know, and if things are kind of pushed aside or we, within the policy subcommittees because of the work group, that I would think that that's fair, you know. That we can still go forward because we've got a lot of city money here, we've got a lot of interest. Let's put focus on the work group. With that said, I'll open it to public comment. Mr. Watts, he had his hand up first, Mr. Ravi. Mr. Watts, do you have want to make a remark in regards to a public comment?
I do. Several, in fact. My video is not working. Where to start? There are 5 police people on this work group when you count Rich. 4 and 1, 5. That's an exigent squad of soldiers going to take over 5 unrelated individuals who don't know each other from Shinola and have no sense of organization, in addition to 3 board members. So this is a top-heavy group, and this guy is off his rocker. You guys did not request this group. It was requested by the Citygate Consultant Group to spread some more change around with the university community types. It's incredible that you can paint this as something, as a positive move. This is so that the police can further, hey man, they have already neutered you, and now they're going to continue to neuter you further if you don't stop it. Again, I'm being very serious that this is a group of 5 professional police people who are going to organize and do everything they can to say what, when, and if. We don't need to sit around and have a kumbaya moment about this stuff because the police will always do what they're directed. But they have to be directed, and they will cry like a bunch of babies, just like they did when, remember, our town cyber lynched the first black police chief and ran his ass out of town. That's what happened. And so, no, This is a group that Citygate brought together. You guys didn't request this. In fact, you crafted an ordinance where you actually expanded your police powers, or your policing of the police powers. And as you all hopefully remember, I am fully out there. I want a community police review board that regulates the police, sets the policy, reviews all complaints, and tells them what to do, when to do, if to do. As soon as the community controls the police department, it'll be better. Now, you talk about diversity. The police impact on poor people. Doesn't matter if they're black or white. Poor people. How many poor people are on this think tank? We are never represented. Or you get a bunch of amby-pambies who can be told what to do, when to do, if to do. So it'll be curious to see what happens in these, quote, public group meetings. This thing has been delayed so that it can further anesthetize the public to what's going on. So I hope Lawrence Accountability has some more cogent remarks. These extemporaneous talks are bogus. Thank you.
Mr. Ravi.
Cogent remarks. Everything Stephen Watts said was true. And when Stephanie Littleton and the chief disagree, he's going to tell her that it's a difference in perception. Because this right here is a difference in perception. That's a difference in perception. Some of us perceive that as police violence and police overreach and police abuse. He keeps moving the camera so the public can't see it. That's nice. You got everybody in the bag, Rich. And everything he said about the police taking over, it's all true. Because it's a difference of perception. If you don't like it, it's just a difference perception, and they do whatever the hell they want. Just like in that packet that I gave you, that Rich said that I wasn't allowed to give you. Can you believe that? He's taken over this board enough to tell you that I'm not allowed to give you something without giving it to him. This is exactly what we're talking about, guys. Exactly what we're talking about. He has no control over this board, and as long as he does, it's not an effective board. And I would also like to know why we can't have the timer over here running so that I can see how long I have instead of having this jackass interrupt me. Anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, there is in your packet the bias complaint that I submitted last month at the city commission meeting that was sent to Richie Boy and all the commissioners, that was about the homeless man getting the only jaywalking ticket in this town. What Stephen Watts said was right. It's socioeconomic more than it is race. I'm not going to say that there's not race, because I've seen that as well, but you're socioeconomic bullshit in this town, because they get people that can't fight back. They get people that they think can't fight back, that'll go into court and take a fucking plea on bullshit charges that your guys ran. They get people that can't fight back. They get screwed by this system. Ron Terrace Washington sits in jail for 7 years in pretrial confinement. What the fuck? But your department did this. And it's got years of history behind it. Officers decertified, kicked off of the police in the nation, but they were allowed to resign and covered up for by this police department. Bradley Williams is a perfect example of that. They criminalized the people that came out speaking against that guy. They criminalized us. And now you have me as a result. And just so you know,
30 seconds.
Jonathan needs to know that when the chief first came to town, I sent messages to him, and so did Stephen Watts. I remember we exchanged some emails about this and asked for a meeting, and everything was all nice and hunky-dory. But when he showed up to that meeting at the library, he absolutely refused to meet with me if I didn't turn off my camera. That's how we treat transparency in this town. And then when I turned off my camera, he tells me, I can see your pain. And then less than a month later, exonerates a complaint saying that he assumed I knew something that I didn't.
Moving on to,
Sir, you've got another public comment.
is there another? Okay, thank you, sir.
My name's Kevin Henderson. I'm the chairman of the LPOA. I'm just seeking clarification on, are you guys trying to have an alternate? Because we kind of went back and forth. Are you planning on having an alternate or not?
I think the plan at this point is to move forward with the 3 that we've discussed here. And then after the doodle poll, if there's some availability issues, we can reassess.
Okay, because if you guys are going to have an alternate, the individual that was lost the election for us, I'd ask that she's allowed to be back involved as well.
Wait a minute,
For
that's why
the
we have
LPOA.
4 already.
Hey, Mr. Ravi,
I just wanted clarification, so if we're gonna add, if you guys are gonna add an alternate, I'd like to be able to add an alternate for the LPOA.
You would request parity.
yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think that we've kind of kiboshed that idea.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's police overreach.
Moving on to monthly complaint report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You guys have your monthly complaint report there. I do want to point out that you do have a revised version of the October complaint
Littleton's
report.
trying to talk.
And you have a revised version of the October complaint report. After our meeting that month, it was brought up that not everything was included, and so we've gone back and added some additional details that include, we reported that the complaint involved excessive use of force, false report, tampering with evidence. There was also a standards of conduct and an improper conduct complaint that was not included in the report. So it's in the revised report now, and I wanted to point that out to you. And then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
And one of the things that I asked the chief to add in there is a description of the details like exonerated and sustained to the report, and that will go forward with every report. They will have that listing. Why I asked that is because individuals that's listening in this meeting or looking at the complaint report may have a question on what is the police or whoever determines or defines sustained or exonerated. It may sound like something very simple, but it is better to have it there, and then it removes the interpretation issues there as we go forward. So going forward, that will help with the complaint report understanding.
Yeah, we've included the definition of all the classifications,
Yes.
so you'll know what those are.
Okay. Public comment. Mr. Ravi.
Yeah, I'd like to know why we just accept that, here's the complaint report, if you have any questions, ask. Why can't he read them out? Why can't he read out for the public what those complaints were and the exonerations, because all of them are exonerated again, including the one out in North Lawrence that I have a video of where I asked Eggety his damn name. That's all he had to do was tell me his name. And the only reason I wanted his name was because I wanted to know more about the mental health unit. He had a mental health unit shirt on. Wanted to know who he was. That's it. But they exonerated that, just like they exonerated this. And that report that they had to update is this. Because I called your chief a liar. Because he tried to bring in bullshit reports. And what he's actually done here is he doesn't respond to complaints properly. Because that bias complaint that I said just a minute ago, I haven't even received anything about it, acknowledgement that it's been received or anything. He's got a complaint in there about Eggety. It's the last one, I think. But this one specifically is number 39. I remember that very clearly. But the one about Eggety is the last one that's where the officer responded to the accident and refused to identify, and they exonerated him. You can watch the video on my page and you can see what happened. It was disrespectful at best. He didn't need to prolong that bullshit like that. But in any case, you guys now have the report that it's been exonerated, and I have yet to have any contact about that report. I have yet to receive the exoneration, just like I still have yet to receive the exonerations from August 29th of 2021. I've never once received those. And this chief seems to think, remember when we had that talk about anonymity and being able to submit things to you anonymously? We can't do that because the chief demands to have a copy, right? Last thing before I finish up, I'm going to jump back to when Jonathan was up here speaking, because this happened in an open public meeting, and I want to make sure the other board members are aware. Your liaison over here thought it was important enough during that man's presentation to come up here and start whispering to your board leader, who in turn started having a discussion with Ms. Bickford. Now, because that happened in an open meeting, the citizens demand to know what that was about. It happened in an open meeting, people. It happened in a COMA authorized and governed open meeting. What was that about? See? Difference in perception, right? Difference in
30
perception.
seconds.
Is that what that was? What was that about? It happened in an open public meeting. Why does our liaison find the need to walk up to the dais and get in the middle of the dais during somebody's presentation? Because he runs your asses. That's why. Because he runs the shit here, doesn't he?
Time.
I'd be happy to address that. I don't know how appropriate it is to have side comments or not, but it was just, we were discussing that we did need to get to the discussion of who we were appointing.
Yes.
Was the whole context.
And it was just
for
the two of
disclosure.
us. It was just the two of
Just
us.
that we needed to bring that
I appreciate
up.
you disclosing that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I would just
Absolutely.
ask that that kind of stuff creates a trust issue for us in the public.
Understood.
Thank you.
And believe me, Mr. Ravi, if we had something that we felt that was really, without trying not to impede the meeting or slow things down, we would have shared that with all the parties involved. Moving on to Mr. Watts, see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about policy issues. And, for the longest period of time, I have promoted the idea of a policy and procedure manual, which eventually came. Of course, it was a shot in the foot for me because it's controlled by the police. Anyway, just to show you some of the fun and games that can play in reviewing one of the complaints, one had to do with a guy saying, they didn't get his name, rank, and serial number. And Rich has cited contact policy 924.7 in our manual, which says, they need to identify themselves. But it does not say when. So if they identify themselves 2 weeks later, ostensibly, this police complaint review process, not the review board, the internal complaint review process can say, they gave the name and they're telling the truth, but they don't add the last part. It was 2 weeks after it was requested. So there we have it. Once again, another example of we need to direct the police. This is what you do when this happens. 1, 2, 3, 4. You shall 1, 2, 3, 4. Not when you get around to it. I hope that you can see these distinctions. They are important in terms of controlling the police department. It is an administration. Why are you guys bending over backwards for parity for the police, making $130,000 a year? How about parity for the sanitation workers? How about parity for the clerks? How about parity for the MSO people? How about parity for the homeless outreach people? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to, we're going to try to speed things up so that we can get out of
Board
here.
Member
at a
Littleton
reasonable time.
has a comment.
Oh, boy, okay.
All right, this is Board Member Littleton. I do want to ask the chief regarding the November complaints, if we can get an update since this was put together, if the ones that are on there November, chief, if they are still in process.
Let me look at that. It should say on there if they are still in process.
Yeah, you have to read it. It should say, he don't want to discuss it. Fuck you, chief. You're a piece of shit.
It does say that. I just wanted to clarify if they are actually still in process, chief.
Yeah, that's what the report says. That's what it is. I'm having problems pulling it up on my phone.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do you have any more questions, Board Member Littleton? Sounds like we're good there. Next topic is discussion about frequency of meetings. I had brought up this topic.
Can we just pause for a second? Because we're not allowing, you're not asking the board members if there's any comment on these topics, and we are receiving this complaint report. Only the bias or racial or bias-based complaints are under the purview of this board currently. I think that that's something that's going to be discussed in the work group, what the scope of this board is. But the complaints that Mr. Ravi was addressing are excessive force, and that is outside the scope of this board.
That's so noted.
And if Board Member Turner has any comments, I'd like to at least
Well, she didn't.
give the opportunity for her to speak. before we move on.
She didn't have her hand up. But Board Member Turner, Board Member Bickford, do you have any more questions?
Thank you for bringing that up. I'll make sure I raise my hand or put my hand up when the complaints process comes up. I was curious about PC 22-129, the bias complaint that was in there. That's still in process. It was kind of unclear. It said a third party actually made that complaint, not the person themselves. So I thought that was something, given our duties on the board to kind of look, question and inquire about. That's the first bias complaint I've seen so far. So. Seeing if anyone else noticed it or if there's anything, further. Looks like an individual was cited and a third party witnessed it and is still in process, and it's a bias complaint.
This is Board Member Littleton. I do think Turner is asking for clarification on that, if we can gain that, regarding what's stated underneath there for PC 22-129.
What clarification are you looking for?
She's asking regarding, it states a third party alleged bias in the manner the citation was issued, and she's saying it appears this is
Complaint made by a third party. It says it's still in process. So, it seems like when it comes down to, as a board, what our duties are, obviously we are specifically delegated to look into the bias and harassment and discrimination complaints, but there's one on these complaints and it's like we're all looking like birds here.
So, Dr. Turner, if I may, so you're by the ordinance, the way it's written now, you would only become involved in this complaint after it's been resolved, and if the person who made the complaint wishes to appeal it, the ruling to this board. So what we do is we receive the complaint. This was a third-party complaint. The third party did not witness the incident. It was reported to us. We are now working through trying to identify the person who actually received the violation. And then once we get them, we'll take a statement from them and then make a determination about whether it was bias-based or not. So obviously, the only person that knows whether it's bias-based would be the person who was actually there. So
Right.
while the third party filed it as a bias-based complaint, that third party didn't provide any facts that would make it a bias-based complaint. So that's why we have to do the work. And then if it is determined that it was bias-based, but it was for whatever reason one of the classifications, then if the person who was involved in the incident was unhappy with the outcome of our investigation, that's when they could ask the CPRB to look at it and then either confirm our ruling or make a different ruling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So as of right now, then it's just being listed as biased. The person's not found, and we're just kind of reviewing these complaints to review them.
So I started providing this to the board as a way to be more transparent with complaints that were in process. This board had not, they didn't see any complaints at all until the end of the year. You got a complaint report with how many complaints we had. So now what I'm giving you each month is a summary of the complaints received. If there's been a disposition, the disposition, and then if they are still in process, then you can see they're in process, and then we'll report when they're disposed of at a future meeting in that report. So it's designed so that you all now can track the complaints. So now we're telling you there's a bias-based complaint when it was filed, rather than you not even knowing that it was filed, so that you can follow that through the process. And that way we're providing you more information here to try and involve you as a partner in looking at these complaints, so that it's not just you never getting a complaint. Prior to my being here, they had never received a complaint at all. And how far back does that go, Stephanie? It's what, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, 3.5 years to be exact.
So now you all are getting to look at complaints every month, and you've all been invited, if you need further information, to go down and visit with our Office of Professional Accountability to get more detail about complaints if you see the need. And so that, and several members have done that. And again, if you have questions about them, we can't discuss them in an open public meeting because they're personnel matters, but you certainly can go down and ask questions and see information so that you can understand the complaint.
This is Board Member Littleton. I have to expound on what the chief just stated about going to see, since Ms. Turner, you're new on the board. Myself and James Minor went in November and sat down with Sergeant Casey Cooper. I had asked to look further into 2 complaints that are on the October complaint log. I thought we were going to be able to see into the actual file, and I'm just stating it as is. I know we don't have those rights per our ordinance to see beyond anything, like the chief just explained, Ms. Turner, that it has to be bias-based, they have to appeal the findings, and then we could go into executive session. But anyway, we did meet with Sergeant Casey Cooper, and he gave a very involved overview of both of those. We could not see in the files, but what he did convey to us, I felt comfortable at that point with what we were told in confidentiality. I appreciate that time. I appreciate what he provided, and he met with us after hours. I would encourage any of us on this board, if we look at one of these and we have those concerns, that we do this with the opportunity that's being allowed to us to at least go as far as we can to understand and be able to convey back to the community that they're investigating these fairly and properly. And that's what it's really all about for the transparency. I would ask, and I know we've gone a long time, I've asked a lot of questions tonight, but I would ask the chief, and I guess if there is one and it's not a bias-based, it doesn't fit what's in our ordinance, if we as a board wanted to see one in an executive session, is that a possibility?
I don't, it depends on what you're wanting to look at it for. We had the one that we looked at that was just to give you an example of what went into the process. And so we could talk about something like that, but the problem is we aren't, the board's not set up to do these reviews of complaints that aren't bias-based. And so there's a lot of issues to take into consideration when we start opening those up. And so we would have to have a further discussion about that with our city legal department to determine if that's something that would be appropriate. Because they're personnel files. And as far as that goes, you all are not a government entity that's affiliated with the city. You're an advisory board, so you don't have any more, as I understand it, any more access to personnel files than the average citizen would have. So we would have to check with them to see if we can do that and make that happen.
Sure, but
I'm not saying no, I'm just saying we need to explore it with city legal to see if it's possible.
right, but these reports that we're seeing are available to the public.
Yeah, this report that you get is
Right.
online, so that information,
Generalized.
yeah,
Individual personnel information has been redacted
Right.
from those.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And this is Board Member Minor. Along the lines with Board Member Littleton, when we went there, I felt, not 100%, but I felt very good about what Major Cooper provided to us in information. And I really think that the board and the environment understands the process and the procedures that go into that, because, there is someone's life or things on the line. And then my question would be, if this is a possible bias-based issue, when can it be brought to the board or something like that? So we, not so much brought to the board to explain, but to understand, here's a stopping point or ending point, and we could learn a little bit more from that incident to help us better understand that. So I think going forward, that would be the challenge that this board would have, is how to educate ourselves and train ourselves better to understand, okay, it's went through the process, it is now close to being closed or closed, and what can we look at which is within legal realms, if that makes sense.
And I think some of that's going to come out with the work group. Once the work group works through all of these things, right now the ordinance permits you to be basically an appeal body for bias-based complaints, and that's it. So if the ordinance changes, then obviously we would comply with the ordinance, and there would be other provisions in place for that.
Are there any other questions of Board Member Bickford?
I don't have any further comments. Does any
Oh,
of the
Board
rest of
Member
the members
Turner?
of the board? Sorry.
Board Member Littleton?
I apologize, I completely lost contact. Now, I guess that was cutting me off.
You said I was cutting you off? I wasn't.
No, I think my computer said enough of you asking questions.
So, Mr. Watts, you have your hand up.
You've already taken comment from.
Okay, that is correct. Discussion, let's moving on to the next topic. Discussion about the frequency of meetings. I brought this up, maybe going to quarterly meetings instead of every month. What does the board feel about going to a quarterly meeting? That would be like March, the next one would be in March, the next one would be in June or July. And this is kind of like a fair opportunity at this point because we do have the work group that we're going to be consumed with meetings there as well. So, we could work within that time. So I'm opening this up to the board to see what they think about having, going to quarterly meetings.
And just by way of background, the ordinance requires you to meet at least quarterly.
Yes.
So that's the minimum, just so you're aware.
This board member Littleton, I would just like to jump in and talk a minute on this. I know I've given a little bit of insight to James on this previously. I feel very opposed to moving to a quarterly. I worked very hard to get this to a monthly. Doesn't mean it can't shift, but we did so because of the subcommittee work and so much that we have to do as a board. Granted, now we're back to 4 members with limitations. The only thing I would feel comfortable about, and I would not take a motion to formally go to a quarterly, is to maybe, if we start the work group, if it does happen in January, that we take the month off and take it month by month and decide, do we need to meet or not? So we leave ourselves the opportunity to be able to still meet if we so desire that we need to put something on the agenda.
Board Member Turner or Bickford? You have comment, questions, statement?
I second Littleton. I think, especially as the new board member, I think it's very important to stay and remain meeting monthly, especially given the types of clarity and reform and work that we needed to do. And I think we owe it to the community as well to be meeting monthly.
Board Member Bickford?
I support those statements.
You support those statements. Okay, so I don't think we need to put this up for a motion or a vote. We already have 3 say no. I would more like be the thumbs up, the odd person here because of our current situation, and provides us more opportunity to understand more of the processes and the procedures and doing subcommittee work. But since it's 3-1, we will not go to quarterly meetings. Is there any public comment?
Board Member Littleton has another comment before we go to public comment.
I didn't see your hand. Okay, I see. I didn't see your hand, Stephanie. You didn't raise it high enough.
I apologize. I wanted to make a statement on something other than this. So if you want to go to public comment, please go ahead.
Oh, I do not see anybody here for public comment, so please proceed.
Okay. Is Kevin Henderson still in the room?
He is.
Okay. I meant to address a question to Kevin, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So on the record, this is off this board member Littleton. I just want to ask Kevin, does the LPOA have concerns if somebody cannot be present? Our thinking of an alternate is not to have one more in addition to anybody else. It was really about making sure that we have at least the 3 present if one of us is out for vacation or sick or what have you. But I just wanted to gain clarification for the LPOA if they have any concerns if somebody cannot be there from their membership.
Yeah, sure. I think the issue is the way the ordinance is written, or way that, I guess, ordinance might be the wrong term. The way it was is LPOA will have 2, police command staff will have 2, and then there'll be the outside, the board, and then the citizens. And I think if you start altering that, it all goes back to trust with this thing. If you start altering that in the middle of it, you're already behind the 8 ball on it. So it's just an issue of when we had our election and our board got moved a little bit, there was a question of, hey, can this person still stay on it? And I immediately was like, no, because it wasn't written that way. It was written that 2 LPOA members would be on there, so that's the way we're going to adhere to the rules, the way it's written. If I was unable to make it, Ian would be there, and I'd be absolutely expect him to do what he needed to do as a one-person LPOA representative. I don't expect I'll miss too many at all. That's only my issue is if we start altering things that are already set in stone, then you might as well just change everything and say, why can't we have 50 people on there? So that's my only issue is if there's rules set forth already, we need to adhere to the rules.
Yeah, no, this board member Littleton, that's fair enough, Kevin. I mean, that makes sense. I wasn't thinking even more like that. It was just making sure we had, representatives there. But I think from what I really hear from Jonathan, once we start all getting the information rolled out to us, that he's going to try and get everybody the best date that's going to work for the most people. So, but I appreciate your explanation, Kevin.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have one additional, James. I would like to, can we get clarification as to the police representatives that are going to be on the work group that will be in this?
So the police work group people will be myself and Deputy Chief Anthony Brixius.
Okay.
I'm not sure where they got that there were 3 members of the command staff because that's not the case.
Okay. I didn't believe so, Chief, but I just wanted to get clarification since it seemed to be a concern. All right, thank you.
And this is Board Member Minor. Anthony Brixius, is he LPA?
He is not. He's a deputy chief.
Okay.
The only members of LPOA are the police officers and detectives.
Okay.
So anyone sergeant and above are not members of LPOA.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So the next meeting is scheduled for February 9th, and I will not be here. So we will not have a quorum. So we will not have a meeting in February. Board Member Littleton?
This board member Littleton, I would ask, kind of looking forward to possibly March, a couple of things on the agenda I'd like to consider. The chief's aware of this. James, I think you're too aware of this. I'm working, starting to work with Lieutenant Myron Grady, and hopefully we'll meet soon with Officer Allison Haddad to help facilitate some collaboration with the new PFLAG chapter here in the city, which I'm excited to have them put this together. So I'm going to try to work at bringing all together to build a great partnership for the LGBTQIA plus community. So I'd like, if things work out, and probably would before March, to get all of those parties together to be at our meeting on March for some exposure to the community to help with that engagement and bring them together as partners. So that's one thing. The second is, and I know the police department's brought this to the table a couple of times, but it's been quite a while, and James, you and I talked briefly about this, is getting some additional, or let's just say some status update and maybe some insight on the IA Pro, I don't know if I'm saying that right, the dashboard. I know a long time ago we've been shown some of that, Chief. I don't know where that stands today. Just wanted some clarifications, like are all complaints being tracked? Just some other questions that I have, but also now that we have this Turner who's new to this, and also when maybe that the board can see how this works, if we could come in person. So a couple of thoughts on that one.
Yeah, if you want to come and see how the system works in person, you just have to get with Major Cooper or Lieutenant Halstead, they're happy to show that to you.
Okay, if we can get something on, maybe for Mark.
Yeah, that's not a problem because Board Member Littleton and I talked about.
I think we lost Stephanie.
I think we did. But before she comes back on, Board Member Littleton and I talked about, whenever there is an example, software-wise or things like that, myself, I like to just know what's here. I don't need to see any names. I don't need to see any details or anything, but just what does this system involve? And in general, just a process. Officer or somebody sits down and they say, here's some of the things or the key fields that we use, and enter into that process. It's standard in the private industry, and I don't see it being out of line in the public industry. We just say, hey, this is what this can do for us.
Sure.
I don't know. I think she exited out. The other thing is on March, I like to would have, I plan on having update to my thing with the complaint and examples, some more things there. So that's my goal, is to have some more steps in how to make the complaint process more accessible.
Is that the online complaint process?
Yes, that is the
Okay.
online process. And once again, it's only a recommendation. I'm not going to try to program it or demand anything like that, but just,
Gotcha.
accessibility there. Let's see. So we've covered this. So are there any other questions, statements? Ms. Bickford, Ms. Turner? From anyone else in the audience? Virtual? Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times? Okay, so I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Oh, geez, Stephanie stepped away. All in favor of closing the meeting today for January 12th? Raise your hand. Sounds like we're done.
I guess Stephanie abstains.
Yeah.